then he said, أما حياء كرم كما جرى للمصطفى إذ زينبا تقمرا. As for the haya of generosity, just as it occurred with Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he married Zainab. Taqammara means, to spend the night, Zainab, the first night of their marriage. What happened was the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam married Zainab radiallahu anha, and he invited people over for a walima, a wedding ceremony, and they came, and then they didn't leave. 3 of them stayed behind, and the Prophet, being as generous he was, he sat with them, but he just got married, and it's his wedding night, right? And so he's waiting for them to leave, and they want to be with the Prophet ﷺ. They're enjoying the company, and so they didn't leave, and so he got up, left the room to kind of give them an idea, and then he came back, and they were still there, so he sat down, and then he finally left again, and then the ayah revealed, to leave the Prophet. When you finished your business, to leave, to go. إِذَا طَعَمْتُمْ فَانْتَشِرُوا. When you finish eating, go, move along. And so that type of modesty is not blameworthy, because there's no hukm shar'i, and it's out of his karam that he didn't say, it's my wedding night, can you please go now? It was out of his karam, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that he didn't say that. I mean, there would be some people that would, they wouldn't have any problem with that at all. But he was so generous that it wasn't in his nature to do that. And so he's saying that is not that's not a blameworthy. وَأَشْبَعَ الْقَوْمَ مِنَ الْوَلِيمَةِ. He fed them, وَخَرَجُوا عَنْهُ سِوَى ثَلَاثَةِ, and they left except for 3. لَبُّوا وَلَمْ يَأْمُرْ بِالْإِنطِلَاقِ فَهُوَ مِنْ مَحَاسِنِ الْأَخْلَاقِ. So they stayed, and he didn't tell them to leave, and so that's from good character. That's not blameworthy. And then he said, لَوْ كَانَ رَجْلًا. That's for the line of poetry. كَانَ رَجْلًا صَالِحًا, and it's a way of saying rajul. And it comes from a hadith, لَوْ كَانَ الْحَيَاءُ رَجُلًا لَكَانَ رَجُلًا صَالِحًا. If modesty had been a man, he would have been a righteous man. So it's a hadith of the Prophet explaining that modesty is a very, very high thing. وَالْخَوْضُ فِي مَا لَيْسَ يَعْنِي إِنَّمَا يَحْرُمُ حَيْثُ كَانَ فِي مَحْرُمًا كالفكر في محاسن الأجانب وعورات المسلمين الغيب. Now he's talking about the heart's engagement in matters that do not concern it. So he's talking about al-khawd. Khawd al-qalb is the movement of the heart, and basically the heart, he'll go into it later about, I think it's, I hope we get to that. I think we'll get to it, inshallah. But he goes into great detail about the types of thoughts and things like that. And so what he's saying here is that khawd, if you have the heart moving or reflecting in things that are prohibited, then it's prohibited. But that is also, it's what they call tafakkur. Or takhayyul, not tafakkur. Takhayyul. Tafakkur is when you think about ma'qulat, and takhayyul is when you think about mahsusat, sensory things. So he says there that al-khawdu fi ma laysa ya'ni innama yahrum haythu kana fi ma haruma. If you're thinking about something that is haram, then it's haram to think about that thing. And then he gives you an example, كَالْفِكْرِ فِي مَحَاسِنَ الْأَجَانِبِ, like reflecting on the beauty, fantasizing about the beautiful qualities of those unrelated to one by marriage, from male or female. So thinking about things that one shouldn't be thinking about is considered prohibited. And also, including that would be weaknesses or faults of Muslims, whether they are absent or present. So actually reflecting on the faults of Muslims, right? I mean, you shouldn't even be doing that. And that's why there's a hadith, طُوبَى لِمَنْ شَغَرَهُ عَيْبُهُ عَنْ عُيُوبِ غَيْرِهِ. There's a tree in paradise for the one who's preoccupied with his own faults over the faults of others. His own preoccupation causes him to forget the faults of others. And the older you get, the more serious you should take that. You know, really. And it's just, life's too short to be. Everybody's got faults, and if you start thinking about other people's faults, you're just a fool. The point is to get rid of your own. And also, I put in there, because it's important, but it's in the commentary, also reflecting on the nature of Allah's essence. The dhat of Allah is haram. You can't think about the dhat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm going to, inshallah, go till 2:30 and then we could pray. The next one, وَأَصْرُ خَوْفِ الْفَقْرِ سُوءَ الظَّنِّ بِهِ تَعَالَى وَالدَّوَافِ الْحُسْنِ وَعِلْمِ أَنَّ مَا لَدَيْهِ لَا يَقِلُّ وَأَنَّ مَا تُرْزَقُهُ لَكَ يَصِلُّ. أَصْرُ خَوْفِ الْفَقْرِ is, what he's saying is the origin of fear of poverty is a bad opinion of Allah. So, fear of poverty is one of the diseases of the heart, and shaitan in the Quran, Allah tells us that He promises you, يَعِدُكُمُ الْفَقْرَ, you know, He promises you that you're going to lose your money. That's something that shaitan does. He promises you that you're going to lose your wealth. And so fear, and this is going on right now, right? This is a time of real khawf al-faqr, right? Because there's all this uncertainty in the dunya right now, right? You're having collapses all over the world, and the Americans are obviously getting very concerned, and stock market and people's portfolios are getting thinner, and all this thing. And the thing about it is, faqr, real faqr, these people don't know, they don't have a clue what faqr is. I mean, really, people don't have a clue what faqr is. I mean, you want to see poverty, you have to, you know, you go to somewhere like India, you know, go somewhere like West Africa, go somewhere like, you know, now Kosovo and places like that. I mean, there you'll see real poverty. People don't know what poverty is. So fear of poverty is a bad opinion of Allah, su'adhan, because Allah promised to provide for you, right? وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهِ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ. Whoever has taqwa of Allah, Allah promised, that's a jumla shartiyya. In Arabic language, that's called a conditional sentence. If you do this, I'll do this. And the condition is, if you have taqwa, I'll provide for you. That's a promise from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you have taqwa, I'll provide for you, and I'll do it from even where you wouldn't think it was coming. In other words, it won't be from the things where you expect it, your job, your monthly salary, whatever. Allah can provide you from places that you would never expect, but it's on the condition of taqwa. If you don't have taqwa, then Allah is not obligated to take care of you if you're not doing what He asked of you as a condition for walking on the earth with dignity. Because if you don't do what He said, you're going to walk on the earth in humiliation. Especially the Muslims. Because we should always remember that the dunya is the paradise of the non-Muslim. So if they have their good now, you should be, you know, this is all they're getting. You know, this is all they're getting. Let them enjoy it. Seriously, think about that. This is all they're getting. And this is what Ibn Daqiq al-Eid's, there are different people it's related to. Izz ibn Abd al-Salam, I've seen it related to two different people. But the meaning of the story is sound anyway. There was a Jewish man who was oil. He used to sell oil. And he would heat up oil as well and sell hot oil. And he was covered in the oil, and his clothes were dirty, and he was a poor man in Cairo. And one day this alim, very famous, wealthy alim, came out. He had a white horse, came out, and this Jewish man came out to the horse and said to him, "Do you relate a hadith that says that this world is the paradise of the disbeliever and the prison of the believer? And he said, yes. And he said, then I have a question for you. What kind of paradise am I in, and what kind of prison are you in? Right? And so, Izz ibn Abdul Salam, they say he looked up, and then he looked down, and then he said to him, when I contemplate what is waiting for you because of your disbelief in the next world, I can only assume that you're in paradise now. And when I contemplate on what Allah has prepared for me, for my belief in the next world, I can only see this as a prison. And as the story goes, he said, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu Muhammad Rasulullah. So, but the point is, this is all relative. Poverty is a relative state. And your fear of poverty it's also a foolish thing, because what benefit is it, right? There's American humorist Mark Twain said, most of my problems I never actually saw them. Right? In other words, you've got all these concerns that you think about and you never actually see them. They're just in your head. And so that's part of the thing about having fear of poverty. It just ends up in your head. And if you're impoverished, you don't have any fear of it. Right? Well, what are you afraid of? That's your state. But if you have money and you're always afraid of poverty, what's the point of having money? If it's going to create all this anxiety for you and all this problem and all this trouble, you're better off without it. And al-haramu, al-hammu nusf al-haram. Anxiety is half of growing old. There's a hadith. Anxiety is half of aging. And there's a hadith, al-birru yazidu fil umar. Righteousness will increase your age. It'll lengthen your life. That's a hadith. And one of the interpretations of that I think is really interesting is people who are righteous don't have anxieties. And people who are irreligious, they're in this constant state of turmoil within themselves. And so their hearts are never at ease, and they have all this anxiety, so they age faster than other people. So their life gets worn out. They dissipate quicker than other people. So fear of poverty is a waste of time. And now he says that the cure for it is have a good opinion of Allah. أَنَا عِنْدَ الظَّنِّ عَبْدِي بِي. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَا أُرِيدُ مِنْكُمْ مِنْ رِزْقٍ لَا أُرِيدُ مِنْهُمْ مِنْ رِزْقٍ وَلَا أُرِيدُ أَنْ يُطْعِمُونَ. I don't want them to feed me, and I don't want them to provide for me. Right? Allah says that. I don't expect that from you. And then He says that He is the Razaq, ذُو الْقُوَّةِ الْمَتِينَ. Right? Allah is the Razaq. I'm the one who, Razaq, ism mubalagha. It's an exaggerated form. Always providing. Continuously providing. So Allah is the provider. Have a good opinion of Him. And then He says, to know also, وَعِلْمِ أَنَّ مَا لَدَيْهِ لَا يَقِلْ. And know that Allah is not diminished. His mulk, His dominion is not diminished by Him giving out. If He's giving somebody all this wealth over here, it doesn't diminish His mulk. And that's why you shouldn't have hasad for Him. Because just like He made him wealthy, He can make you wealthy. But again, you should be content. Qana'a. That's why the Prophet ﷺ said, Al-qana'atu kanzun la yafna. Contentment is a treasure that's never exhausted. So know that what He said. And then also know, وَأَنَّ مَا تُرْزَقُهُ لَكَ يَصِيلٌ. The thing that's been allotted for you, it will reach you. And there's a difference of opinion amongst the ulama about rizq. Some of the ulama say that rizq, right, Allah is raziq, He's also ar-razaq. Some of the ulama say that your rizq, which was maqsoom, it was allotted to you in the womb of your mother, that it is only what you'll actually use in the world. And others say it's everything that you have. But the dominant opinion is it's only what you use. In other words, if you die with $1 million and you never used it, it wasn't risk for you. It was actually risk for the people that inherited it. right? If you had a house in some place that you never went to, it wasn't risk for you. Even though you owned it, you could have gone, you never did. No, it wasn't maqsoom, because you never got any benefit out of it. In fact, I saw a book the other day called How to Live Well. No, you have to live wealthy and die broke, right? And that's that idea, right? Don't let anybody get it after you. Just use it all up, which is a horrible thing, because in Islam you're supposed to think about your children and think about, it's good to leave something behind for your children. And the Prophet ﷺ didn't, because prophets aren't allowed to leave behind dunya. That's not. Now, the next one is called mudahana. Right? This is a really important one here. وَبَادِرُ الدِّينِ لِإِصْلَاحِ الدُّنَى مُدَاهِنٌ فِي بِعِهِ قَدْ غُبِنَا. One who uses his religion as a means of benefiting his worldly condition is known as a sycophantic hypocrite, mudahin. In his transaction, and he has been cheated in the end. Mudahana is a really important concept. Right? وَدُّوا لَوْ تُدْهِنُوا فَيُدْهِنُونَ. They would love if you would make mudahana, so they could make mudahana. Mudahana is where you use your deen to rectify your dunya. Imam Ibn Khaldun mentioned, he said, نَرْقَعُ دُنْيَانَا بِتَمْزِيقِ دِينِنَا. We try to sew our dunya up by ripping our deen apart. Right? People in this world, he said, نَرْقَعُ دُنْيَانَا بِتَمْزِيقِ دِينِنَا فَلَا دِينٌ يَبْقَى وَلَا دُنْيَا نَرْقَعُ. So our deen doesn't remain, nor do we ever rectify our dunya. In other words, it's a stupid thing to do. Because you lose your deen and you lose your dunya. Because Allah won't rectify your dunya by destroying your deen. He won't let it happen. He won't give you tawfiq in that thing, right? You'll lose both. So, the point of mudahana is when you, like for instance, you don't make inkar because it's your business, it's your boss, and you don't want to lose your job. It's a dunya, right? So you do this hypocritical yudahinuhu is a hypocritical behavior because you're afraid of losing some worldly benefit, right? Like that. So it's where you actually lose your deen. It's not that, for instance, if it's none of your business, you stay out of it, or if it's not wajib on you to do it, which in many instances it's not, then you have a choice of doing it or not. But this is actually where you lose your deen because of some love of dunya. And I put a reasonably long note there just about, because this is really an important one. And there's another concept which is important, which is mudarat. And also I just mentioned that mudahan, the root word is duhan, which is like covering up. You know, it's cosmetics, oil that's used in cosmetics. It's covering up, it's a type of kufr. Sheikh al-Yadari says in Al-Khatima, mudahana is when a man gives his religion up in order to secure his wealth or his blood. And sitting with the people of disobedience and keeping their company and praising their actions and displaying pleasure at their condition without condemnation, just for some worldly benefit. So that's haram. And keeping their company, right? The difference between this and mudarat is expending one's present life, the dunya, for the sake of one's afterlife, or for the sake of some worldly benefit, or both. In other words, yudari, the Arabs have a proverb, darihim ma dumta fi darihim. You know, mudarat is where you're nice to somebody and there's a reason for it, but it's not at the cost of your deen. If it's the cost of your deen, it's called mudahana. If it doesn't harm your deen, it's mudara, and it's permissible. You don't have to do it, but it's permissible. They say, darihim ma dumta fi darihim, wa hayyihim ma dumta fi hayyihim, wa ardihim ma dumta fi ardihim. You know, like greet them as long as you're in their hayy. Don't make enemies in you know, you don't like. my brother-in-law was in an office. He just got here from Morocco, and he was in this office, and he drove all this way to get this to see somebody, and they said, "Oh, sorry, you have to have an appointment." And he's like, isn't there something you can do? I just drove like 45 minutes. And she said, no, there's nothing I can do. He said, there's nothing you can do. And she said, no. Because in Morocco, obviously, it's not. And he said, well, that's America, And I said, no, don't say that. It's the wrong thing to say. You can't go back where you came from. That's the way they'll take that, right? Most Americans, they'll take that. Go back where you came from. So mudarat would, in that case, because you might want to make an appointment. Now she remembers you said that, so she doesn't write it down in the book. And then when you show up, you don't have an appointment here. Right? So mudarat would be a situation like that, where it's permissible, even though you'd want to say something else, to say something nice, as a way of ensuring a worldly benefit, or another worldly benefit, or both. It can also be used for somebody who wants to, and it's not considered nifaq. This is not hypocrisy. It's a recognition of Islam that there's things in the world that you have to do, and this is a rukhsa for people. And another one also is helping other people. So using your position. If you have a position, like somebody who's close to the minister, and somebody's been oppressed, and that person has an ability to get in and help this person out, that's a mudara, right? Because you're friends with the minister, you can get them help like that. And those are all praiseworthy things in Islam. And just in this culture, there's a type of, I'm okay, you're okay culture, that is the mudahana. So people do wrongs and everybody says it's alright, there's nothing wrong. So there's a type of conspiracy of silence that takes place. Whereas in Islam, a mu'min is the mirror of his brother or sister. They want to see them improving, getting better, and so they do things. And then the next one is, he says the origin of it, وَأَصْرُهَا الطَّمَعُ وَالرِّيَاءُ دَوَاءُهُ عِنْدِي لَهَا الدَّوَاءُ وَشَمِّرْ إِنْ أَخَذْتَ فِي دَوَائِ عَاقِدَ الْوِيَةِ ذِي الْأَدْوَاءِ أعني الرياء أحد البوائق إيقاع قربة لغير الخارق بل طلبا لنفع أو لحمد من خرقه واتقاء الضد. So now he says its root cause is desire, tama'. So we get back to tama'. And doing works of worship to obtain a place in the hearts of others. That's called riya. Riya is when you do an action that's a qurba. It's with the condition that it's a qurba. In other words, something that draws you near to Allah, right? If you do an action, فعل القربة لغير الله. That's the definition of riya. If you do a qurba for other than Allah, you're mura'i. And the Prophet ﷺ called it a shirk al-asghar. It's the lesser polytheism. And in a hadith in Ibn Majah, the Prophet ﷺ said, I don't fear for you worshipping the sun, the stars, and the moon, right? But I fear for you the worship of other than Allah through riya. Riya. And there's another hadith, أَخْوَفُ مَا أَخَافُ عَلَى أُمَّتِي riya. The thing I fear for my ummah most is doing things for other than the sake of Allah. So it's izhar. Now obviously somebody who, like if you're a really good shot, or an archer, or something like that, and you want it, people are there and you're doing it and somebody shows up and now you're really going to show them that you can do it. It's madhmum muru'atan, not shar'an. In other words, we have to differentiate between sharia and muru'ah. In Islam, muru'ah is something that you should preserve, your human dignity. That's something, it's blameworthy to do that. Because it is showing off. But it's not showing off in something that relates to a religious matter. So it's not a shirk with Allah like the other one is. So he says, the source is desire and also riya, right? You want people to think better of you, to gain a place in the hearts of others. And he says, its cure is also my cure for the latter disease. In other words, I have a cure for both of these. And he says, my cure for tama' is my cure for riya also. So he says, washammir. So roll up your sleeves, get to work and set out for this cure of the root of all these diseases. Tama', right? And riya. get to work, because riya is tama, you're desiring something from other people, not from Allah. And he says, get to work because I've got this cure, right? And aqidi alwiyati dhil adwa'i is, aqid al-alwiya is the root. Aqidul liwa, the one who's carrying the banner, it's like the one who began the thing. The Arabs say aqidul liwa is the one who begins something, so it's where it began. And so he says, I mean by that showing off in good works, riya. And now, this is really important here. Look at this. The signs of riya are 3. Laziness and a lack of actions for Allah's sake when one is alone. So you don't have energy to do things when Allah's alone. Like you don't have energy to read the Quran. But when you're in the masjid and there's other people around, you have all this energy to do it. That's a sign of riya. Enthusiastic energy and much action for the sake of Allah when people are present. So the opposite. When they're not there, you don't have any energy. When you're there, you've got energy. Now, there's something that I think also to be careful about, even though it is a sign of riya. وَعَزَّزْنَا بِثَالِثٍ. There's definitely something to be said for company. And that when you see somebody who's worshipping, it can sometimes stimulate you to worship, which might not be from riya, but it's just as the result of like a esprit de corps, a type of, because other people are doing it, gives you an energy to do it. So that's not necessarily a negative thing, but the danger is that you're doing it not for Allah. All right? And then he says, increasing one's actions when one is praised and decreasing them when one is not praised. So you want to hear people tell you how wonderful you are and how much, like the man praying, and people say, SubhanAllah, we always see him pray and it's incredible, he just prays all the time. And then in his prayer he says, what about my fasting too, right? The people that love to hear other people saying those type things, right? Right. Yeah. Well, that's behavioral psychology is all based on that. Rewards and stick and carrot to motivate people. In Sharia, it's not necessarily, there's definitely something to be said for encouragement. In other words, the Prophet ﷺ, when he saw people do things good, he used to say, ahsanta, you did well, things like that. It's not wrong. And there is a hadith that says, if the mu'min hears somebody praising him, it increases him in iman. In other words, it makes him want to do more with Allah, you see. So it has the opposite effect. And this is why this idea of here is that you're doing it solely for the praise. That's what he's saying is the dangerous thing. In terms of telling people, and also there's a difference in Sharia between madah, right, flattery, and between thana, right. Madah is when you're flattering somebody where it's not true, right. Whereas what's permissible is to tell somebody that they did a good job or something like that. You should acknowledge people. Not prohibited. In fact, it's encouraged to acknowledge people, to acknowledge what they do, things like that. The danger for people is to desire the praise. And that's what the people have to work on in their own hearts. And there is a cure for it. He's going to give it in a second. We're almost there. People... Because I'd really like to get through this. We should pray. Do you want to come back? Or do you want to come back for about half hour after Dhuhr? So we'll pray Dhuhr and then come back.
Takbir.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Inshallah, there's not much more through here, and then we'll be caught up to, so we're on, because I've arranged it so we can get through this during these 12 classes. Inshallah, so I'd like to try to keep up with the Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So he's dealing now with riya, and we were looking at the signs of it. And then, so he says, as for its treatment and purification of the heart concerning it, it is to remove from the heart 4 things: love of praise, fear of blame, desire for worldly benefit from people, fear of harm from people. Right? Now, the way that's accomplished is one having yaqeen, certainty that only Allah can benefit or harm you. And that has to be done first at the level of aqidah, because that is a premise in our aqidah. In other words, in the belief system that we're commanded by Allah to believe in, there's no harm and there's no benefit except from Allah. Right? Those are 2 names of Allah, an-nafi' wa dar. And if you really believe that, then you recognize nobody else can benefit you or harm you. It's an illusion. Right? It's just an illusion. And so that will free you from this desire for praise and blame or for something other people have. Because in the end, what you really want is Allah to be pleased with you, not other people. Because it's a waste of time. So if all these other people are praising you, telling you how wonderful you are, and Allah is not pleased with you, it's a disaster. And the disaster manifests itself when you die, which is when you wake up. So the point being, don't be deluded by praise and blame. And then another thing to remember is people all over the world, right? There's like Muhammad Ali. There was a time when Muhammad Ali was, he was the big man on the scene. Everybody was praising him, telling him how wonderful he is. Right? And then he's no longer the guy that can beat people up. So Larry King's not calling him, he's calling somebody else. And it's the nature of dunya. Praise and blame is all related to your worldly position, your ability in the world. When you lose it, people stop praising you. And in fact, some of the ulama, they said that one of the best signs of the truth of this is when you have nothing, it's very difficult to have friends. And the minute you start getting things, suddenly you have a lot of friends. And that's partly is the natural inclination of the world. I mean, that's the way people are, right? And so, if you're not deluded by that and recognize, right, that, then you find, and that's why, in fact, the ulama have always said that knowledge, traditionally in the Muslim world, knowledge was something that people sought after, because in fact, in the traditional Muslim world, unlike today, which is wealth-oriented, it used to be it was knowledge that was people wanted to be associated with, not with wealth. This really is true. In the Muslim world, there were scholars that achieved incredible status in the world simply because of their knowledge, and it's no longer the case now. It's interesting. I was reading Helen Keller's autobiography yesterday, and it's very short and it's an very powerful work. And it's just I'd really recommend reading it. It's one of the most powerful things I've ever read, because she was deaf, dumb, and blind, and it's just her experience of her awakening, the awakening of her consciousness. One of the things she said in there I thought was very beautiful. She said that she became deaf, dumb, and blind from a scarlet fever that she got in childhood. So she wasn't born that way. And it's interesting because she said that even though she was 19 months old when it happened, she said the fact that she could still remember what a tree looked like was enough for her when she felt a tree. Just that she'd seen it one time in her life. She said even though she was only less than 2 years old, and she could still remember that blessing of just having seen a tree, that was enough for her, that she'd seen it. That's an amazing thing, just the ni'mah of the eye, the human eye, is just so awesome. Anyway, she mentioned in there that she said there's no slave in this world that didn't have a king somewhere in his ancestry. And there's no king that didn't have a slave somewhere in his ancestry. Right? So, it's interesting, people, the ups and downs of the world, right? So everybody probably somewhere along the line, right, has, their great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather or something was the king of the Rus. And now they're nothing. Or somebody who's now the king of the Rus, at one time down the line, one of their ancestors was a servant in somebody's house. Get this and get that. And this is dunya. So when you see the nature of dunya is that nothing is permanent. And I'll tell you, when you read the history of the Arabs, the vicissitudes of Arab rulers is just amazing. And if you read like Al-Mansur, the history of Al-Mansur was a Khalifa. He wasn't a Khalifa actually. He was a minister in Andalusia. And he was a mediocre student in the madrasa, but he was very ambitious. And he ingratiated himself, got into the palace, got this one of the really strong women in the palace to one of the mothers of a Khalifa to be. He enamored himself of her, and she put him in these positions. And there was one minister who was the most powerful minister in there that everybody feared. And Al-Mansur succeeded in having him in the end imprisoned. And he was one of the wealthiest people in Cordoba, and he ended up a pauper, dying in rags in the prison there. And you can imagine the life, that man's life, right? And so it's just the nature of the dunya is like that. So recognizing no harm and no benefit except from Allah. And then also that likewise if the whole creation wanted to harm you, they couldn't, unless Allah willed it. And then if someone believes that with certainty, riyah doesn't occur to him. Because the reason people do riyah is to get some worldly benefit. You want a worldly benefit. So in the traditional Muslim world, because religious people were so honored, there was a type of showing off in order for them to get a position amongst people, right? And still, that's still a danger because the Muslims still do respect religious behavior. So people will do those things. Now, he says, I mean by that showing off in good works, one of the calamities of the heart, whose definition is to do an action of devotion for other than the Creator's sake. Indeed, it was really done seeking some worldly benefit or praise from the creation, or to protect oneself from the opposite, meaning harm. In other words, some people will do it simply to get praise, because they enjoy hearing how wonderful they are, and these type of things. So that's why they do it. Then he goes on to give its various types. أعظمه ما كان وصرة إلى ذنب كمبدي ورع ليجعل بيده مال يتيم ثم ما لدنيوي أمتطاه سلما. So he says the worst is that which is done as a way displaying virtue in order to be entrusted with the wealth of an orphan. That's really bad. In other words, you use the deen for some to be put into an entrustment in which, a'udhu billah, like an orphan's wealth, well, you'll misuse it. And this is religious hypocrisy done to actually cheat in the religion itself. And it was amazing. I met this Moroccan man who was talking about people that did dhikr for money in Morocco, which there's actually a lot of people that do that. Because in Morocco, they have singers that sing praise of the Prophet ﷺ, and they pay them to come to weddings and things like that. And he told me because he does that. He's a beautiful singer, but he won't do it for money. And he told me, he said, Allah has made myriad ways to get your provision in this dunya. And he said, so don't do it in a way that is designed to draw near to Allah. In other words, Allah gave you all these different ways to make your money. My father told me in the early 60s he realized that you can make money anyway because he once sent in $1 for this barbecue starter kit. And he got back a match and a small piece of flint. So people, you can make money a lot of ways, especially in America, right? In all these 1-900 numbers and things like that. Psychic, those psychic things. And all they do, right, they call them up. I've never done this, thank God. But people call them up and they say, you're looking for a better job, right? Everybody's looking for a better job. Wow, yeah, I am, right? You're looking for a better relationship. Right? I mean, it's all just these things that poor American people are all obsessed with. And then also they know that he wouldn't be calling them if his life was working out. Right? So they know they can play on that. I mean, there's all these things that they know to do. So the next thing he says is a worldly thing. So the worst thing is an otherworldly thing, an entrustment, like an endowment that was done for religious endowment, and then you use it for dunya, like a waqf, right? Or money that was collected for the sake of Allah, and then the people use it for a dunyawi thing. That's the worst type of riyah. The worst type of riyah, to display religiosity and make people think that you're trustworthy so that they put you in, like, on the masjid board, and they make you the treasurer, and then embezzle the funds. I mean, it's... Go out and rock, don't drop all the time. But, do something else. It's horrible. You read about, like, people that trick, old people, like these people that go, and it's unbelievable what human beings will do. Because there's even degrees of despicable behavior. Not all behavior has the same level of despicability, right? Or despicableness, or whatever the word is.